Today we are joined by Rich and Dana Saal. Thank you for joining us, guys. We'll get started in just a minute. A couple of housekeeping notes about AWC. So I'm Sarah Kincaid. I'm your board chair for AWC Springfield. We are the local chapter of the Association for Women in Communications. Today we're going to talk about digital storytelling and visual storytelling. Before that, I want to just run through a couple of notes. We are opening our scholarship applications right now. So through March 1st, if you know someone who is in college as a junior or senior in a marketing or communications or any business sort of major, and they're looking for a scholarship, we offer a $1,000 scholarship every year to a comms professional somebody who might go into journalism or communications, PR, anything related to our world. So if you know someone in college, encourage them to apply. We'll put the link in the chat in a little bit. Also, if you've been to one of our meetings before, you know that we like to use the chat for introductions and that networking opportunity that we are so sadly missing with this new COVID surge again. So feel free to use the chat, introduce yourselves, say hello, tell us why you're here. Tell us what your role is in your regular life, maybe what you're hoping to get out of this presentation, that sort of stuff. Please use the chat. We will monitor it. And if you have any questions in the chat, I will ask that of Rich and Dana, our presenters, here in just a minute. The Community Foundation of Lincoln Land administers our scholarship, back to that. So put that link in the chat. We are tentatively planning a networking brunch for January 29th, kind of pending COVID, to be honest with you, but we'll put that on Facebook, on our social media channels, and send out an email from AWC if we decide to go through with that, again, pending COVID. So let's talk about our presenters today. Rich is a commercial and editorial photographer and documentary filmmaker based in Springfield. He's a former staff photographer for the State Journal Register, and for 19 years was the photography editor at the paper. Based on his 40-year career as a visual journalist, Rich uses humanistic storytelling approach to create authentic and engaging images in films. He believes this is the surest way to make something that people actually want to see and share. Dana works with her husband as the business manager, idea generator, drone spotter, all sorts of things. Dana is retired from events and association management. So thank you both for joining us. And Rich or Dana, I'll let you guys take it from here.
Thanks, Sarah. And hello, everybody. My association friends, I see some of you saying hello in the chat, and I'm happy to see you and be with you again in my second role with my husband. And so we wanted to talk today about how visual storytelling can cut through the blizzard of imagery. And so we're reaching out to a visual generation, and even people who might not have been born into that generation are still inundated with visuals all the time. Our 92-year-old friend just got an Apple Watch. You know, there's always something in front of people. And so what communicators need to do is to find ways to elicit emotions, bring your brand or your message closer to your target audience, and then promote some sort of action in lots of cases. And so, we're defining, for today's purposes, we're defining visual storytelling as a humanistic approach in the documentary tradition, which is to say we place an emphasis on the main character and his or her relationship to the service or product or message. All right, so now Rich.
Yeah, I have a short picture editing tutorial for you and how you can assess the quality of a still image or video. These ideas are from Joe Elbert. He was a longtime photography editor at the Washington Post. I saw a clip and saved this interview with him many years ago, and it's been sort of a guiding principle for me. And at the time, he was talking about still images, but it certainly applies to video imagery as well, video stories. So he divides still images into 4 categories. And the basic one, the first one, is an image that's informational only. It's just the facts and nothing more. And the second one would be an informational picture that is creatively composed, interesting visually. But the third one, a step up, has an emotional element to it. It's a picture that's going to elicit a response from the viewer. And then the fourth one, the holy grail, the gold standard, are images that have an intimacy to them. These will definitely connect with people far beyond an image that just states simple facts. And I want to share a video with you that we did this spring for the Department of Natural Resources, highlighting a new tour program that they have, walk, hike, and bike tour program. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, but you're showing foot traffic, Rich.
Okay, hang on.
Oh, I see what you're doing. Okay, you're sharing your screen now. You're going to click. Okay.
Great. And that's also,
Beg your pardon, it's the wrong one.
People African American descent in the way they think. 1838, Abraham Lincoln gave a speech to a group of young men here in Springfield, and he denounced mob violence. When men take it into their heads to hang gamblers or to burn murderers, they are just as likely to do that to someone that's not a murderer or gambler as someone that is. Justice should take place in the courtrooms and not in the streets. And in 1908, that's what happened here in Springfield, Illinois.
And they drag him across the street. Now, at the time, across the street was not the museum. There was a school there, Edward School.
This story is really not easy to tell. It's a lot of horrific stuff that happened. Over 40 to 80 homes were burned. 2 African-American men were lynched. But it has to be told, even if it saddens me sometimes. Sometimes I have children in the audience or as guests, and I have to tell this story to the children. And to think that their country treated people of African American descent in the way they did, it's hard.
Hang on a second, there's a couple more I want to share.
Rich, our audio wasn't synced.
Did that not sound correct?
The sound was there and the video was there, but they weren't on the same page. But we got the message. We saw Doris's emotional response to the interview.
I apologize. Here's a couple still images that sort of relate to the point I just made. This is what I would call just an informational picture. A farmer, harvest time, approaching the combine. Here's another one. Rich Dewar here climbing a ladder into the cab of his combine. But here's one that goes a little bit deeper. From the context, you can tell he's a farmer. The fact that he stopped to have a meal with his family, his wife and young daughter, goes a little bit deeper, has a little bit more, tells a little bit more about the story of what's involved for farmers and how this is not just a 9-to-5 job, it's something that just consumes them 100% or more, especially during busy times like harvest. So I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to help you have an understanding of how to assess images and what you should strive for when you're hoping to work with a photographer. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more in just a couple minutes. But that's the point I want to make, is that you can determine how good a picture is based on whether or not what your response to that image is.
And so we want to talk about what makes a compelling visual story. And we know that you are all in communication. We know you know your stuff, but we wanted to define the basic elements that we use. And one is authenticity. Like Doris, that was very authentic. And authenticity can come at different levels, but that's a key one. In addition, we want a visual story to be able to convey emotion and passion, like Rich said. And we separate those because authenticity doesn't have to necessarily be, really emotional. And so it's authentic and it conveys emotion and or passion. It's also used to make complex stories easier to tell. And I'm sure you're aware of that. And that's really important for when you're trying to reveal something or share a message that just has some depth that's not immediately recognized. And then finally, it's relatable. It resonates with your target audience. And so Rich has a still photo shoot he did that provides an example of relatability. This is from the summer of 2020. Remember that summer of 2020, so very long ago. And COVID lockdown, of course. And we live in a neighborhood that is very, it's very old. So there's lots of front porches and sidewalks and that sort of stuff. And so we just noticed how many more people than usual and dogs were walking. And so we set up the backdrop and made portraits of these people. Rich did the shooting. I did a little bit of interviewing and asking them what kind of responses they had, what were they doing, and then it ended up being picked up by the Illinois Times. So some of you have seen some of these images.
You seeing the images, Dana?
I see one, but it's not changing.
See a new one?
Nope.
I'm sorry, everybody. I got a message here that sharing has stopped. Okay, here it is. Never mind. Let's try this.
And this was fun for us because we actually met a lot of people in our neighborhood. I normally meet people in the neighborhood all the time, but I wasn't out during that summer. And so I got to meet a lot of people, and we made friends with people who we photographed.
Let's try this again. For some reason, I'm not, the share screen is not going on. Meredith, when I'm speaking, my window's not highlighted. Does that have an effect on whether or not I can share the screen at the moment?
It's highlighted when it's highlighted for us, Rich. They're saying in the message, it should be fine. So we could see your screen, Rich. It just wasn't advancing. So do you need to just advance it to the next slide or the next still?
Maybe.
Yeah, so I think that if you just clicked on each picture separately, you'll be okay.
See, I'm more worried about going to the thumbnails.
Then just open one up right by it.
Okay, it says it's screen sharing now.
There you go. There you go. So this is our little neighbor. She still rides that around the streets. That was great. So we're evoking emotion. The text added a little bit about, oh yeah, here's what we're doing during COVID. Lots of dog walking.
So how do we? So how do we get there? How do we make compelling visuals? Here are some key steps. First of all, you have to decide, you have to ask yourself, what's the story? And then what's the real story? And I'm going to describe a advertisement I've seen on television recently for a service that offers, for a company that offers cremation services, end-of-life services. And the visual with it was 4 people sitting in a fluorescent lit room, small conference room with voiceover. And I thought, I mean, the the feeling I got from that visual was very cold. And I thought, for a service that's there in a time of need for a family, I thought perhaps a missed opportunity. Maybe there's a family that they have served in the past that were willing to be willing to speak about their experience using their services. Maybe they're recalling the life of their loved one, they're deceased, and maybe there's some 1 or 2 or 3 or more still images of that individual. So you establish the relationship between that person and the deceased, and then you have them explain through their own eyes, their own experience, their own voice, what that company offered them. To me, that would have been far more compelling than the one that I saw. So what I'm trying to get at is to think about who is going to, the voice that's going to tell your story to your members or customers, whatever. The second thing to think about is when you choose a photographer, you want to look carefully at their work. You want to know how the people in the photograph must have felt when they were being photographed. Are they at ease? Are they comfortable? Do they look real, genuine? Do they look alive? You know, is there any energy, spark in that picture? Those are all things you have to consider when you're making that decision about who you're going to work with and who you're going to use to tell the story that you have. The other advice I'd ask or give about choosing a photographer is to choose somebody because you like the way they do things and you think that's a good fit for your story. Don't treat a photographer as a commodity. In other words, if photographer A is not available, then photographer B will do because they've got good cameras too. Choose somebody that you want, that you feel confident is going to be able to relate your ideas, your story, the best that they can. Also, of course, this is obvious. It's not just about liking their work. It's about liking to work with them. You want somebody that's going to be collaborative, going to bring some ideas of their own to the process. Somebody you enjoy working with. And then the next step, maybe the last step, is when you get into it a little farther, is casting that main character. If you're doing this in a documentary style, this is where you want to find somebody who's going to be the best advocate for your case. And it may or may not be the CEO or executive, unless that person is a company founder and has a very unique perspective, a personal perspective on the product. It may be just somebody that's a longtime employee or maybe a longtime customer, somebody that's going to be able to articulate what that company's services or offerings has meant to them. The next thing is when we get to editing the project.
Rich, I'm going to interrupt because excuse me, Rich, I thought of this while you were talking. So those of you from my association past will recognize what Rich said about what is the real story. And so I used to teach when we're asking questions to get down to the core. And so when I want to emphasize that because sometimes the real story is not as obvious as you think. And so digging deep is really important. And the photographer should be your partner in collaborating on that step right there. And so once again, those of you who know me knew that we would work together until we came to the point where, oh, that's the real question, reason, whatever, fill in the blank. And so your photographer is going to be a collaborator on that as well. And then casting the main character, Rich said it, and I just want to emphasize it so much because the CEO, like he said, may have a unique story, but if they can't tell it, if they're like, well, in 1875, we invented this, you know, you want to have somebody who can actually create the energy. And I know you ladies all know this, but it's hard sometimes to tell the CEO, no, not you this time, sorry. You know, we're going to use Joe from housekeeping because he's the one who is on the floor, literally, who knows what's going on and who has the connection to people. So Joe from housekeeping might be the exact person you need to tell the message.
And I think going back to the video I showed of Doris Bailey at the IDNR, I mean, the project initially was simply to highlight these new tours that the agency was offering. And even though I was familiar with the story of the 1908 Springfield race riot, I'd researched it before, I knew about what had happened. Honestly, it didn't seriously occur to me what it would mean to Doris to tell that story. And so the real story is that they have this tour. The real story really is that it's such a personal presentation for her. And when I did that interview, I was, it was just amazing for her to reveal those feelings, because she did this tour, I think, twice a week. And to do that over and over again, it was just a very powerful message about, you know, the tour program.
And it showed emotion clearly, but it was also very intimate. So that clicked off a whole bunch of things. And the other thing about that that project is that Doris didn't hire Rich and me to produce this. Rich did this one mostly, but Justin Blandford did. And so we could have interviewed Justin and said, tell us about
Walk, hike, bike.
Thank you. I get that order. And he would have been fine. You know, he's a good interview. But look at what it did. And so we ended up doing 4 with that project. And so they're all people who were tour guides and not Justin. And so that's another example of not using the CEO.
I want to move on now to the editing process. So some of you might be familiar with this. Maybe you have in-house video people, or you've worked with video photographers in the past. It's really a simple process. It's complicated sometimes. There's lots of pieces that need to be put together in just the right way. But the way that I like doing things is to use supplemental visuals to add context. For example, B-roll and or historical images if it's appropriate. I think establishing a company or an association's longevity can translate into integrity for those watching. I want to show, the other point I want to make is music. It's such an important part of the process. I did an interview with Mike O'Shea, the president of O'Shea Builders. And this is a current and ongoing project for me. It's documenting the construction of a monastery in rural Macoupin County for a group of cloistered Dominican nuns. And we started this process back in March at the groundbreaking. And so the visuals come from just a face-to-face interview with Mike. And then through occasional visits, scenes of the construction process. It wasn't terribly exciting visually, but I put it together to build a little bit of suspense, and I think the music helps. Let me show you now, if I can get the right one to play.
There was a group of local businessmen who had formed a committee to come around these nuns and advise them. That committee met.
Are you seeing
over the course of
Not full screen.
a long period of time?
Okay, hang on. There's
maybe 2 years, trying to there was a group of local businessmen.
I'm sorry, I don't know why it's not.
There was a group of local businessmen who
I don't know why it's not playing full screen. Hang on, bear with me. Do it this way.
There was a group of local businessmen who had
Share
formed a
screen.
committee to come around
Is that
these,
working?
nuns. And
We need to
advise
see the
them.
screen.
That committee met over the course of a long period of time, maybe 2 years, trying to decide how the project should be shaped and what could ultimately.
Can you stop
be
the
afforded.
audio?
And the initial thought was they are.
Can you see the video now?
There was a group
Yes.
of local businessmen who had formed a committee to come around these nuns and advise them. And that committee met over the course of a long period of time, maybe 2 years, trying to decide how the project should be shaped and what could ultimately be afforded. And the initial thought was they are so far removed from what they need to fund this project. We just need to implement the most meager project possible to get them on the land. And this group is just like talking and talking and talking, but really not doing anything. And I think this is so cool because in this season in my life, I read a book called Every Good Endeavor. And it's about the intersection of our work and our faith. And to me, that's a very important and powerful topic. And I don't know that I ever saw that brought forward more so than with these sisters, because their vocation is to pray, right? That's their job. That's what they believe they're called to do. And so while all these business people are sitting around the table with all our hot air, that they're praying. And as we're trying to shape this project, we get these calls from sister, and there's along the lines of, hey, we got an investment from here, we got an investment from there. And it wouldn't be an investment, it'd be a staggering sum of money. And it wasn't just once, it was again and again and again. And to me, back to that intersection of our vocation, our work, here it is, their work to pray. And so they're praying that God will provide while all these business people just keep talking, and God keeps providing. And it was just an amazing thing. And so here we are, 4 years later almost, they've raised what they need for construction. And I'm going to say that if we think of the various models we looked at in terms of construction, we looked at a bicycle, we looked at a Yugo, we looked at a Rolls Royce. We're somewhere in the Buick and Cadillac range. They prayed all that into existence, as well as an endowment that should be able to support them for years.
I hope that makes sense, that you understand how those elements can come together, the visuals, the supplemental supporting visuals, and the music, to sort of carry along what would otherwise be just a very straightforward face-to-face interview with someone. I have one more video to share. Is there something else that you need to cover, Dana? I want to share another video story, documentary project that we worked on this past summer.
No, there's nothing. I want to, this will be a good closer. And then, like Sarah said, put the questions. We wanted to show you the examples as most of the information. And so that's why we didn't have a lot of audio time. So the pictures and the videos are posted on Rich's website that you can see without the bumpiness and the experience we have on this sharing on the Zoom. So you can go back and look at those when you want. Run the clip, Rich.
I'm going to try this and hopefully it'll work.
It's good.
I beg your pardon. I need to set this up because it's actually quite a long story. The entire video piece runs for almost 10 minutes. I'm going to start this about 2/3 of the way in. This is a story about two Springfield men who took on a an ultra endurance bicycle race back in June in Kansas. It's more than 300-mile gravel bike race, entirely self-supported, starting about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They ride through the night and all through the next day. And Keith Busher and Chuck Kaderko, the subjects of the story, had calculated that if they could keep moving, they would ride for approximately 30 hours. So they obviously had trained long and hard for this and done the research, and they'd done a couple other endurance rides together, but it was really an ultimate test of their endurance. And so it starts after they've just made their first rest stop. That's what they call it. They didn't actually stop and rest. They pulled into a gas station, filled their water bottles, got a couple snacks, ice and such, and just kept on pedaling. And the first voiceover you hear is a guy who's an ultra endurance athlete here in Springfield, who added that voice of authority to the piece because he's been through a lot of these endurance events, and he talked a little bit about what they would face on this long journey. This clip runs for a couple of minutes, so bear with me.
The audio's not working.
It's not?
Mhm.
There's no audio at this point.
Okay, that's why it's not working.
Okay, dusk is upon us.
Hear that?
About 60,
Yes.
70 miles in almost. And Chuck's just looking fresh as a daisy.
Do we think we'll succeed? I think we will, especially with Keith along. He's such a strong rider. He's such a great guy to ride with. He has such a great perspective on things, and he knows how to do long endurance events from a wide variety of different experiences in his life. We'll definitely have a story to tell about an adventure.
The thing that's going to be the hardest for them is the sleep deprivation. It's the way you make decisions. It's the way you handle that stress when you are sleep deprived. The further out you go in your event, power-wise, the more important the mental aspect becomes. Pacing, hydration, nutrition, being able to deal with adversity. Those aspects are the things that break people at hour 30 and hour 35. You've just got to expect it. Something is going to happen, something bad.
Yeah, like miles under. All right, hike section number 2. Well, we went on this big honking hill. And we went from black stuff to gravel and in the smooth stuff. Headed up. Miles an hour, 35, just flying. It felt terrible. And when I got there, he's sitting up and he's holding his arm and he's moaning. And Chuck's so chill, and he's even chill when he's hurting. He's just quiet, and for him to moan, that was not a good sign.
That's where the train came off the track.
There was a spot where it got really soft gravel, and that's where he caught his wheel, I think.
Yeah, I was just a little bit maybe too far to the right, not paying attention, going faster than I should have.
So he hit that and he went flying, and so now he owns the moniker
Disco ball with lights spinning around.
essentially ended our attempt at mile 111 and in our 13th hour at 3:45 in the morning. And he was not in good shape. For a while, he was in a fetal position and ended up going to the ER. And by that time, I'm like, I'm done. I can't keep going on. I'm pretty spent too.
But the discussion goes, you know, is this something we want to do again? Is this worth it? Do we want to come back to Kansas? Because I guess that would have been my 6th event at Kansas. It was his 4th event.
So, you know, the question is 12 more hours of full-on sun, heat. Could we even have gone 24 hours? You know, the longest I've ever ridden a bike is 20 hours. And I was pretty tired at that point. I can't imagine almost doubling that.
And then by the time we're driving home and we've come up with our 11 or 12 lessons learned, it's okay, well, if we're going to do this next year, here's what we need to do. So I don't know, we'll see.
It's Saturday evening come around and dusk hit, would I have just been a zombie? I don't know. That's the allure. You don't know. I'm gonna find out.
Cut the audio. There you go.
I'm trying to quit the.
Yeah. So those are just very basic elements. And we also want to leave time to explore the subject with you and what have you experienced and what is challenging to you. I do see Susan Helm's question about what about rights to music. So how do you deal with that, Rich?
All of the music that you would have heard in these 3 pieces I shared are all royalty free. There is sometimes a very modest usage fee. I've never paid more than $50 to use them in this context. There's a lot of places, resources to find royalty free music. So it's really not that hard to find suitable music. At least it's not been my experience to find music that I thought fit.
There's websites available for this kind of thing. So Sarah, how do you choose the person who is interviewed and any criteria or personality you look for? So that goes back to step 1. What's your real story? Okay, so you find out what's your real story, what's the true message you want to convey, and then you look around and ask a lot of questions, and who is that person or persons who can tell that story the best? And there may be some digging to do.
Yeah, and that also comes back to how the photographer relates to people, how people feel. Do they feel comfortable sitting in front of him or her? Doris Bailey was very nervous. She was not excited at all about the project. I filmed her doing her tour first before we sat down and did a face-to-face interview. But in the end, she came to like a champ. I mean, you just talk to somebody as though you're sitting in chairs on the front porch, and with luck and a little patience, you can get them to reveal themselves. I mean, you sometimes have to say to somebody, you got to give me everything. You got to lay it out there and tell me everything you're feeling. Otherwise, it's just going to be a failure. And so you put the thought into their head that, you know, okay, I'll give it a try. Fingers crossed that will work.
So one of the things that, so I looked at a question. I got to quit looking at chat. It's also about creating a relationship before you even start shooting in some cases, and establishing that repertoire with the photographer or the team that's going to be there. I've been on shoots with Rich at times that sometimes I can break the ice before he can, and those usually happen to be when they're a little bit tighter time schedules. So I didn't go with Rich on the Race Riot shot. That was something that he could develop over time. And those locations he shot on that were all part of the Race Riot tour.
Yeah, and I think, Sarah, you're asking about the locations for the bike tour. Again, I just did the tour. The bike tour stops at some of the, well, it stops at a couple of the usual suspects, the Dana Thomas House. It also stops at the Governor's Mansion. It stops at the, goes through the Lincoln Home neighborhood, stops at the Lincoln Colored Home over on 13th Street, I believe. Old State Capitol, and then we went out to Oak Ridge Cemetery. So that was just a matter of me following along. The trick to that was riding a bicycle and holding a video camera at the same time. I'm happy to report I didn't fall over.
I'm happy to report he didn't fall too.
And Jan, you're asking if we storyboard, if I storyboard a project before I start. I have not. In the case of the gravel ride, you know, we didn't know how it was going to end. Nobody knew how it was going to end. It obviously didn't end the way we had all hoped. That was really just a case of following along and letting the story reveal itself as we did. I mean, I had ideas about what I wanted to get before before they got to the race. I started writing with them and filming with them during their training. I filmed some things at home of Keith. He makes us all homemade food for the nutrition they carry. I did a lot of those things. So it was, you know, an idea of what parts I needed, what components I needed to tell a story. And then when we got to the editing phase, it was just a matter of choosing which ones stay in and which ones don't.
I'm going to expand a little bit because we don't storyboard as in blah, 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 but to ensure that the message is being told the way the client wants it or the way that Rich is aiming for when he's doing his own work. We do have conversations about, okay, this and this and this, and I'm a big objective person. What's the objective? And Rich pushes against that as a very artistic and creative person. But going through and knowing what you want to get out of it is the version of storyboarding that we would do.
Yeah, and maybe that's because of my background as a journalist, where nothing was scripted. You know, of course, storyboarding obviously will be very important if there's a complicated piece and we're trying to make sure we have all the components lined up before we start production. But in the cases that I shared with you today, I didn't do that. Jay, you're asking me about my drone work. The drone is something I bought because I just felt like, you know, I'm a Central Illinois native. I grew up in Peoria, but I've been in Springfield for more than 35 years, almost 40. So, you know, Illinois here is very flat, and it's really difficult to get a perspective of that expanse. And I just thought the drone was the obvious way to do that. I also enjoy agricultural related topics. I have some farming in my background. My family, my grandfather farmed. So I like being on farms and seeing farm work. And I just knew it would be an essential tool to help do that. There is demand. I have some clients I do some work for to document their projects. An engineering firm, for example, I used it in the monastery. I'm using it in the monastery project to get that perspective. It's just a tool that helps or that can add a perspective that you might not otherwise be able to get just simply standing on the ground.
But Rich also really resists gimmicky things. And that's what he, under the category of authenticity, he doesn't like gimmicky. So if the story didn't need drone, he wouldn't use it. If the story didn't need video, he wouldn't use it. And so it's, when we're talking about visual storytelling, and we didn't emphasize this as much, but it started a long time ago with stills. And stills can tell stories. And if you go onto his website and look at the portraits, there's a lot of emotion in those portraits. And once again, there's a connection with the subject. You can tell, you know, now that if you don't have the eye, and I didn't, honestly, I didn't have the eye. If you go and you think, oh, I want to see if there's some emotion or some connection, you're going to see it in those portraits. Nancy Zimmers, I see your question up there. How have you adapted the skills to this work. And I can tell him, I can speak for him, and then you expand on it, Rich, is when he is working with clients and who know him as the photographer and the photography editor at the paper, he'll say, the video is a tool. It's still using my eyes and my visual sense. So it's just that the camera is moving. Very simplistic. Rich, expand on that. Save me from myself.
No, it's there's very good production, video production companies in Springfield. My perspective is based, as I said earlier, on my background as a visual journalist. And so I feel this is the way I approach things because it's in my heart. It's the way I would tell a story. I just feel there's so much power and appeal and benefit to telling a real story. It may not apply to your business. It doesn't apply to, it's not applicable to every single situation, obviously, whatever your association does, or whatever your company or service provides or whatever. But where it does apply and where it's employed wisely, it can be very well done. And I've started to think in those terms and really sort of limiting my scope now to stories that can be told that way. And just because that's it's just my manner to do work that way. It's just an extension of the way I shot still images and trying to capture moments with a video camera. Those are the things that appeal to people. And as I mentioned in my bio, it can create things that people actually want to watch. Any other questions?
Thanks for sharing the link, Mary and Christy. Oh, Christy shared to Instagram and Mary shared to the website. So some of my favorites, we couldn't show everything, but some of my favorites on the website are in the agriculture. And speaking of Central Illinois being flat and big, there's some great video. One is what I would call a combine rodeo, and it is at night. So the headlights of the machinery is on. Did I say that right? Combines, Rich? Yeah. Pickers. Yeah. And so it's the visuals overhead of the equipment doing their thing in the, in the fall. So that's a fun one.
Before we go, I do want to apologize for the technical glitches. I hope everyone was able to see what I was trying to do when I shared the screen. There were some fumbles there, but I hope it worked. Sarah, is there anything else we need to do? I know we're at about 43 minutes now, 45 minutes. So
real quick, I love Jayette. She says, the combine video is unexpectedly dramatic, isn't it, Jayette? It's just like, go, go, go. So there you go. There's your teaser. There's your page turner.
I'll have to check that out.
Uh-huh.
I'm a city girl from St. Louis, so I don't know much about combines or farming or agriculture really, but I've learned quite a bit in the last few years living in Springfield. So thank you both for joining us today. You guys feel free to put comments in the chat. I don't know if you guys have a hard stop or you need to jump off, but yeah, thanks for joining us for AWC. For anyone interested in the scholarship, I did put that in the chat. Send that to your friends or anyone you know who might be in college, have a college age kid looking for a scholarship in communications. And thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights with us. I personally learned several tips, so thank you so much.
Good.
As a person who works with the photographers and not as someone behind the camera. So thank you so much.
And we're at rich@richsaal.com if you have questions.
Awesome.
Feel free.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you much, everybody. Thank
We'll
you.
stay on to answer questions. I'm watching.
Okay.
Right. Thanks, Sarah. Any tips for working with subject remotely, like in another country?
I know it's done. Christy, are you on or can you hear me? I know it's done. From what I've seen, it looks very cumbersome. I've never done it. I'm not sure I'm interested in doing it.
So, but here's a thought though. I mean, isn't it the same thing, Rich, is that so the only thing different is the technology. And so it would be the connecting, having an emotional connection, having a comfort level. And so that working with your subject remotely, you'd start with, let's have coffee together. Let's get to know each other. And then you go into what you really need to go into.
Well, if your question's about the technical aspects of it, Christy, then cameras can be tethered to a computer. I know in still photography shoots, they can be tethered to a camera so that, oftentimes there might be the art director, creative director, or whatever from an agency on the set. They can see on the monitor. You set up an external monitor for them to see while you're shooting. They can actually see, rather than looking over your shoulder or at the back of the review screen on a camera, they can see on the monitor what's going on. So that can be done remotely via internet. With video, I'm not sure how that would work exactly, but it's probably doable.
I'm sure it's doable.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd have to have a team on the other end. Some sort of team on the other end would be probably the best.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Sure.
I've been thinking about like doing a Zoom interview and then recording it. And then, the Zoom interview, like to help you write the story that you're working on, but then also I could maybe, grab some little excerpts from it and then put the Zoom video in the writing. It's so hard when you're not in the same country with some of the people that you're trying to tell a story about.
Yeah, and we see this all the time if you watch the evening news. I mean, so many interviews.
I was just going to say that.
And the obvious thing is, of course, the quality is limited to the person's camera on their phone or laptop or whatever they happen to be using. So, it's obviously not going to be like being there with a high resolution camera in person.
So, PBS Evening News uses not Zoom, the other one, Skype. And so it's done. And then while I was helping association professionals figure out all this, they, meaning the universal, they have created kits that you send to your interviewees. And so it includes the round light, the appropriate light, and it includes a good microphone and whatever else might be important for that interview. And so you provide the basics for success technically. And this is especially important if you don't have a team on the other end. But if it's for really important things, you would just, call London and say, who can help me over there?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so you can also, Christy, I would literally Google, unless somebody on the phone still or on the call still knows, I would literally Google kits for, interviews, Zoom interviews or something. You'll come up with them.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Or just say that you need to get a trip to that country. Well, no, not with Omicron. Never mind.
Yeah, that's been in the works for the last couple of years and it's still on hold.
Oh, gee.
But then,
wow.
There's things you just need to do in your regular daily work too,
Yeah. Yep.
Thanks. Those are great tips.
Good.
Anybody else? Anyone else? It's time for lunch.
Thanks for your time, everybody. This was fun. Good to see a lot of you again.